We're live streaming our podcast for today, and I've just realized that when I'm talking to the microphone, you can just see my ear. But that's all right. We'll adapt.
We are geniuses when we set up, aren't we?
We will innovate. But look, we wanted to unpack the federal budget, what it means for individuals, what it means for tax. And where to. Look, I have to say that it was probably the most boring budget that I've ever listened to. Not a lot of excitement in there. And I suppose that sort of makes sense given that, the government's trying to show restraint. I forget what the other R's were from their 3-point plan.
Responsibility or something. I think we've had enough excitement for the past 12 months anyway with RBA and inflation and everything else going on. Like as you said, the budget is a bit boring, but boring can be good sometimes, can't it?
Yeah. And they're trying to not, add pressure to inflation, which obviously makes sense. People feeling the pain from interest rate increase if they started dishing out cash left, right, and center. That's potentially going to be a little bit problematic. So, William, lay it on us. What do we got?
Look, on that note, they are dishing out a bit of cash here and there, but really for the everyday person, there's not too much going on in here. A lot of benefits though for lower income earners, pensioners, welfare recipients, and whatnot. But what we're going to do today is just unpack a few points on the budget and really the things that you need to know. So we're going to break it down into a few segments. Firstly, we'll go through tax and what impacts are going to be there. Next, we're going to focus on families. A lot of our clients, especially, have young families or aspiring to start a family. So that's going to be a really important area. Next, we're going to go through housing, and then obviously the impacts on business. And then finally, we're going to wrap it up with healthcare and defense and what's happened there. So straight off the bat, with the side of things, super interesting. It's what wasn't in the budget, which is the stage 3 tax cuts. They haven't even mentioned them once that I can find. I did the old Control F this morning. I can't see it in there anywhere.
No.
Which is positive, I suppose.
Yeah. And it's interesting in its absence in that, like, in the last couple of years that stage were already legislated, so they weren't new budget measures, but the Morrison government made a point of carving out the stage 3 tax cuts and highlighting them in the budget to show the impact. Labor have not done that. Perhaps it's because they don't want to talk about the fact that they're not mucking around with them. Perhaps it's because they have plans to muck around with them, which I'm hoping is not the case. I was just chatting to one of our other advisors, and I feel like given that they've now released this budget, the next budget's coming in May of next year. The tax cuts are legislated to come in from July. So it would seem pretty crazy for them to turn around and change in such a short amount of time. But those stage 3 tax cuts, I'm super pumped for because a lot of people talk about them for being only for high income earners, and they do from a dollar perspective benefit higher income earners more, but they benefit a lot of middle income individuals and taxpayers as well. Saving like thousands of dollars a year in tax creates some really interesting planning opportunities for investors as well, particularly for younger people that are trying to build up another income from investing. It's like, even if you're earning an average salary from your job, like you're trying to crank up your investment income to replace that salary over time. That means that you're going to be paying a ton of tax under the current rules. The fact that they haven't indexed the brackets for such a long time means that now we're seeing all this wage growth. So the average salary is increased, but the average salary is pushed into a higher tax bracket because the brackets haven't been indexed. So stage 3 tax cuts coming, not mentioned, weird, but I think that's probably my favorite part of the budget, and it was not in there,
non-existent. And look, just for anyone who doesn't know, effectively the stage 3 tax cuts, if you make over about 45 grand a year, you're going to benefit from them. And what they're really doing is getting rid of one full complete tax bracket, just having a single tax bracket from $45,000 up to $200,000 a year of income at a 30% rate, not including Medicare. So if you make over 45 grand a year, you're going to pay less tax, which is the majority of working Australians, right?
Yeah. And if you make over 200 grand a year, you save about $9,000 in tax. So it's pretty significant savings as your income grows.
Now, looking through the rest of the tax, budget areas, few interesting ones. Tobacco tax going to go up 5% every single year for the next 3 years. Tobacco is already taxed quite a lot to my smokers out there, not me personally, but it's going to get more and more expensive for the next 3 years. Large multinational companies are going to be stung with a minimum 15% tax rate. And then some interesting ones on superannuation as well, which we'll unpack too.
Yeah, so basically the government has pretty much just picked on people that are difficult, like no one feels sorry for, essentially. So they picked on the multinationals, they picked on the petroleum companies that are making a ton of money from the resources boom, and smokers as well. So some measures there that will raise a bit of extra revenue, and it helps push the government into this surplus position, which that's quite exciting as a country. The first time we've seen a surplus for like 15 years. It is a small surplus, and it is short-lived based on the estimates, but there's a big question mark in those estimates, in that they've expected in the forecast that resource prices will basically almost collapse over the next little while, which may happen. It also may not happen, but they've been pretty conservative with their forecast, which gives us some good upside as a country and as an economy over the next little while.
Now, looking at the superannuation one, this one I think is fantastic. It's not coming into effect until 2026, which I think is too long away. But at the moment, when employers pay your super guarantee, they only have to pay it quarterly. So effectively, you might be getting paid weekly, but they only have to pay your super every 3 months. Now, obviously, the downside of that is you're missing out on that money being invested for 90 days, right? So it's a massive downside for your everyday person. From 2026, they're bringing in the rule that employers need to pay super the same time as your wages. Now, I think there was a calculation I saw that it was like a $6,000 or $7,000 benefit for the average person by the time they retire, and that's just because of that compounding effect. So that's fantastic, I think.
Yeah, and I think that what that also does is it reduces the risk for. We've spoken to a number of people over the years that have had some like dodgy employer, and they've not paid their super and not paid it for a long time, and then they've gone out of business or they've wound up the company, and then people miss out on those super payments. So at the moment, because it doesn't need to be paid at the same time as your salary, it's sort of hard for people to look at their super and go, well, is my super actually being paid? Hopefully this measure doesn't cost any more to businesses, although it obviously brings forward a bit of a cash flow cost. But I think it does massively reduce the risk of that happening, gets a bit more money invested sooner, means that also for people that are funding, insurance premiums, or if they've got property in super, that there's more consistent sort of cash flow coming into your super fund. Overall, good thing.
They did announce too, they're going to spend some money with the ATO actually cracking down on people who aren't paying super on time as well. They're going to invest a fair bit more into that. So that's good. So
super GST and corporate tax that they carved out. And it was actually, I was blown away by the amount of money that they're spending on tax compliance. Like it was in the billions of dollars. But obviously that spend, they're expecting to get a net benefit. Again, I think that's great. Like I'm all about saving tax, and I don't think you should pay $1 more than you have to, but you should pay the $1 that you have to, and everyone should do that, because otherwise we're all sort of missing out. So I did say I have to say, I thought you were going to say that you thought that the 30% tax measure was a fantastic measure, which
you would have fired me on the spot.
I was thinking we might have to have a performance conversation here, but that was another one on the tax front that they've reiterated this super high balance extra tax. So balances over $3 million tax at 30%. I think that's crazy. And the main reason that I think there are two probably. One, it's not indexed. The cap is an index. And I think for young people, it's really punitive. It means that as your balances grow, that you're going to, in 20 years time, $3 million is going to be worth like $45 today at the current rate of inflation, or maybe not quite, but something like that. And so it's worth a lot less, meaning that people are going to end up paying a ton of extra tax on their super money. But the worst part is the fact that they're taxing unrealized gains. So
it doesn't make any sense, does it?
Doesn't make any sense at all. It's really difficult practically. And you think about, like, you buy shares in your super fund, or your super companies get buying shares or property investments, or these bigger super funds that have these big infrastructure investments, they can go up pretty dramatically in value in good years. And they're going to have to be taxed on that increase in value, even when it's not realized. You think of all the people that have crypto in their super fund, myself included, you see a spike in that, and then we're seeing crypto massively go up and then go down. You're having to pay tax at the top end, and then the value of those investments can go down. And to make it even worse, you may, in some cases, be forced to actually sell investments so that you've got money there to pay this extra amount of tax. So I think it's insanity.
And even too, like if you're not forced to sell those assets, then it means you're going to have to keep money sitting in cash in that tax bill when the time comes, which if you're in your 20s or something and you've got, X amount of dollars or, in cash for a long period of time, then you're not getting the investment returns that you could be getting, which again is just ridiculous, right? You're minimizing the eventual, comfortable retirement that you're going to have.
Crazy tax. And thankfully that there's enough time, before those measures come in that they can make some changes to make it a little bit more sensible.
Or get rid of them altogether.
That would be nice.
All right, look, on to families. This is a nice welcome change that the childcare subsidy is going to increase, and I think it's up to joint income of about $530,000, which is fantastic. So it means if your kids are in childcare, you're going to get a bigger benefit.
Yeah, so they've increased the amount of the childcare subsidy, like how much of a subsidy you can get. They've increased that the maximum from 85% to 90%, and then it sort of winds down based on your income. At the same time, they've increased the maximum income for a family to be able to access the subsidy. So again, some welcome news there, and they've cranked it up for second and subsequent children. So if you've got, more than one child in childcare, that your rebate numbers get higher. They've also reduced down some of the work test requirements around that as well. So definitely, childcare being one of the biggest expenses that people have, no doubt welcome news for a lot of people. The total measures on that were actually about $10 billion this year and $65 billion in total over a 4-year period. So a pretty substantial amount of money going into that scheme. Also, the sole parents, increasing the sole parent payments up to the age of 14 from the age of 8. A lot of measures for sole parents, which no doubt, really needed at the moment with the cost of living.
To a lot of clients, where they're just child and a year later they want to go back to work, and they might think I'll go back to work 3 days a week, but that's only going to net them 1 day a week's worth of wages by the time they pay childcare. So this is definitely a welcome change.
Yeah, so stay tuned on the podcast. We are going to be unpacking how to plan around kids for mat leave, but I think it's a big one. We've got modeling tools that we use for people to say, okay, what does it look like in your return to work? And sometimes you do it and you've got generally a mum that's looking at going back to work and working potentially 3 or 4 days, putting their kid into care for 3 or 4 days, and then netting like $10,000 a year after costs. So from a financial perspective, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. The effort for reward is not there. Now, there are career, obviously, goals and motivations around this. And we've worked with a number of people that say, look, it's not about the money. I need, sanity. I know what it's like. My wife at home, like just talking baby talk all day. And, but then you've also got your career goals that you want to keep that progressing as well. But understanding those numbers, I think, is really important. Hopefully these measures move the dial, though, for a lot of people to mean that it actually does make more sense as well from a financial perspective. Yeah.
Now, there's been a lot of welfare benefits as well too, which obviously impacts families. So welfare pay at an increase of about $40 a fortnight. Job seeker extra benefits too. Usually when you hit age 60, you get a few extra benefits. That's been reduced down to age 55. But one of the big ones I thought really good is they're actually including some energy rebates, because the cost of energy at the moment's roof, and that's going to impact about 5.5 million households as well as 1 million businesses. So I thought that was a really good one.
Again, lower income individuals and families as well, but up to $500 per household in rebates on energy bills, $650 for businesses in that smaller business category. So I think welcome. Also, they're talking about on the forward estimates that the energy prices won't be increasing as much as what they were talking about. I forget the exact numbers, but it was something like energy power prices were going to increase by 50%. Gas prices were going to increase by somewhere in 36% or something like that. They're now saying that gas prices are only going to increase by around 20% and power prices only by around 30%. Still a massive increase, but a bit less massive. So thanks, Jimmy.
It's always welcome. Moving on to housing. Few interesting ones here. Rent assistance is going to rise by about 15%. So again, that helps people who are struggling on welfare and renting. But we've talked about this before, the expansion of the first home guarantee scheme, and this one's they're scrapping that for first homeowners. It's now, if you haven't owned a home within be a home just bought by yourself or with your spouse, you can now buy with friends or family or anything as well too. So it opens up the floodgates in a good way to a lot more people to be able to get in the housing market or get back in the housing market if they've struggled to for the last decade.
Yeah, you're also including permanent residents into the scheme as well. The places have increased for areas. There's an extra 15,000 places for people in those rural and regional areas. So more people will be able to access the scheme, broadening that up. I think positive for, positive for people looking to either get into the property market or get back into the property market. Hopefully that also sort of ties in with the next measure around the increasing the rebates for companies doing build to rent projects. So we're seeing an increase in build to rent projects. They've increased the tax benefits for those or reduced the tax rate from 30% to 15%, which is really significant change. That's something that's not going to have an impact tomorrow, because these build to rent projects are going to be bigger projects that take a while to actually come online, but that should alleviate some of the pressure on rents. I do think, though, when I hear that stuff, that people should, like, if you're not already in the property market, you probably want to get in, because we've seen in some other countries that when the instos start getting involved in the property market, sure, it might make rentals more affordable, but it can push up prices and mean that more people get priced out of the market. And then it just becomes almost impossible. And it's already hard enough for people to actually get in. So, some positive there, but also, an area that I think you need to be cautious with.
Well, immigration set to boom as well. So, that's just only going to further, add fuel to the fire.
Immigration up, population growth up, fewer people living in households, which means that more houses are required to house the same number of people. So there's definitely, strong demand there and strong demand growth expected over time. So it's not going to get any easier.
Yeah. Now, moving on to our business owners out there. A few incentives here. So the clean energy incentives are really interesting. You get incentives there for double glazed windows, solar panels, that type of thing, if you're thinking of investing in clean energy for your business. One I thought was really interesting, you've got the instant asset write-off scheme, which was $150,000. It was forecast to go to zero. They're keeping that in at 20 grand only until the end of FY24, so only for another 12 months. So if you do run a business and you want to buy 20 grand, it's an instant write-off, which is always handy.
Yeah, and 150 again for the rest of this year. If you've got, if your business is kicking butt and you've got some spending to do, you want to bring that forward, because this is a measure that the government introduced in COVID because they wanted people to be spending money. It's when businesses were worried about spending, so they increased this limit. Now that's due to come off, but they've given us a little sweetener in that they're keeping it in at that $20,000 mark.
Maybe you can use it for pivot and buy me a new laptop. It's always handy.
I think that fit under the old one anyway.
And as we said, some energy bill relief too for businesses as well. Moving on to healthcare, this one was interesting. They're tripling the bulk billing incentive, so it's the biggest investment they've had into Medicare on record. It's a $3.5 billion investment. I got really excited at this because I went to the doctor. They don't bulk bill anymore. At least, in Wollongong where I live, a lot of them don't.
On the beaches, they don't do it either.
Yeah, and I got really excited. And then when you actually read into the detail, it is primarily for people under age 16 or people who hold a concession card, which the majority of people don't fall into that bracket. Yeah,
so it's for children, seniors, or people on welfare payments. Again, maybe, having this for those people will mean that the medical practices are more likely to do it for everyone. Who knows? Hopefully. But definitely, obviously, for those people, it's helpful to see more access to bulk billing, which is getting harder and harder to find. But the middle and higher income individuals are carved out.
Now, on that note too, they have brought in some rules around getting prescription medication, where it used to just be 1 month. Now they've effectively changed that out to 2 months. So that's forecast to save people a bit of money with chronic illnesses that constantly need to go back and forth to the doctor. And an interesting one I thought too, there's a lot of incentives for GPs to actually stay open longer and have longer consultations with their patients, which I think is fantastic. Because I know every time I go to the doctor, it feels like they're just rushing you in and out. You're there for 5 minutes. What's wrong? I'm sore here. I'll see you later. Here's this prescription. Go away.
All right.
On to the next one. So
my GP just talks to me about business for like 95% of the time. And
he's trying to get something out of you.
But look, I think both of those measures, the reduction in the costs of medicines, the more accessible bulk billing, that's one of the things in the budget that is actually really positive for inflation, in that people are going to be spending less money on healthcare. So that means that less money is being spent on healthcare. And that means that the inflation around healthcare at least will go down a little bit. It is limited in its scope and who can actually access it, but overall, I'd say that that's a really good thing.
And look, this final point on healthcare, a really welcome one, 15% pay rise for aged care workers. I think that's fantastic, especially after what they went through with the pandemic. And
yes,
it was a bit of a nightmare. So that's definitely a welcome change for them as well. Moving on to our last point, defense. A lot of spending on defense. So Northern Australia, they're really trying to tighten up the borders up there a little bit and spend a lot of money up there. I think it was $2 billion on some initiatives to secure the border at the top of Australia. So they must see some threats coming from the north.
For more defense spending, I think that they've been underspending in defense for a long time. They're looking to ramp that back up. There's a significant cost to that, both this year in the budget and in the future years moving forward, as they allocate more money from the budget to defense spending. Where that money's going to come from, I suppose we'll find that out.
And one of the last points I thought too was really interesting. I remember it was in the news 6-12 months ago that China was having a lot of relations with Pacific Island nations and trying to build the relations there. And it felt like Australia was lagging in that area. So they've actually put aside a fair bit of money on strengthening relationships with Pacific Island nations as well too. But I think that's going to be a direct contest with what China have been doing for the last 12 to 24 months. So that'll be a really interesting one to keep our ears to the ground and see how that goes.
Yeah, I think that I think a lot of countries, Western countries, are increasing their spending in this area off the back of increasing tensions, China, geopolitical stuff. So we'll see how that one plays out. Hopefully not in a bad way.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Time will tell. All right. Well, look, that's pretty much the crux of what was in the budget. Well, as we said at the start, it was pretty lame. It wasn't anything too exciting, but what we want to unpack now is what that actually means, for people. So one, what does that mean for inflation, which is obviously still, a lot higher than what it needs to be? And two, what's it mean for investors?
Well, the government have put forecasts in the budget around what they think will happen with inflation and economic growth moving forward. So we've got inflation sitting at 6% this year, coming down to 3.25% next year, then 3%, then 2.5% from 2026. And so inflation is higher for longer than what was previously anticipated, but it is coming down relatively quickly considering where we are at the moment. Now, what the government doesn't know is what the RBA is going to do. And I suppose that's a bit of a mystery card in terms of how things play out. But the RBA is trying to achieve this soft landing. The government has shown economic growth is going to still remain positive. So 3.25% this year, 1.5% next year, then 2.25% from 2025 plus. Overall, I think that that's positive for jobs. Like unemployment is forecast to go up, but overall positive for jobs that we're still going to be at a very low rate of unemployment. The economy is still going to be growing, i.e. they haven't forecast a recession. So that's good for investors in the share market, investors in the property market as well, that the economy in the country is doing reasonably well. So overall positive. How high interest rates need to remain, like how long interest rates need to remain higher for, that is the $1 million question at the moment. And no doubt the RBA is going to be closely looking at what came in the budget. And then as these measures come through, what it actually means. But overall, I think the government has spent a net amount of $20 billion. So the total spend of the budget, while they have gone into a surplus, the total spend is $20 billion. That means that there's an extra $20 billion in the economy. So that's another $20 billion that could be spent that could increase inflation that wasn't there 12 months ago. If the government was net saving money, you'd say there's less money in there, and that's going to be disinflationary for sure, because there's going to be less money that people can actually spend. So, but, given the size of some of the previous budgets and some of the handouts, that overall, I think that's probably okay. Like, it's pretty good. It's not terrible.
Coming off what we've come off the back of the last few years with the pandemic and everything like that, it's not
exactly. And I think that while we want interest rates to go down, but everyone, like, no one wants to be unemployed, and we want the economy to continue to grow. So if we're achieving that as an outcome, I think that's overall positive for everybody. So I think at the moment, like, there's a lot of opportunity there in the share market, also property market. There's a bit of uncertainty around those. So a good defense is a good offense, but be smart, take advantage, make sure you manage your risk, and the opportunities are definitely there.
Yeah. I love it when they call it a soft landing, and like people's mortgage payments have gone up by 80, 90%.
It doesn't feel that soft.
Yeah, it doesn't feel that soft to the everyday person.
But so long as you still got a job to make your mortgage payments, I suppose, then that's
that's key.
That helps.
Yeah. Look, guys, that's pretty much everything from the budget. As I said, it wasn't the most exciting budget we've ever seen, but exciting enough if you like numbers and you, like us, you're a money nerd and want to make sure that we're prosperous for the next as long as possible.
That's it. And we'll see them now. The job comes of legislating these changes. So there'll probably be a bit of back and forth, maybe a bit of, flexing on some of the measures. I know that the Greens have been pretty adamant about, wanting to try and get more for people. Whether they'll do that or not, I think is probably unlikely, but, the devil's in the detail there. But guys, a bit there to unpack. Hope you find that helpful. And yeah, we'll catch you next time.
See you guys.
Bye for now.